look at that. Brilliant. Hi everybody, I'm Fiona and we are back in my garage today to catch up with something that we didn't quite finish up last time. With the power steering conversion, we went electric, we installed a cooler, but what I didn't do was delete the power steering pump. So today's all about deleting this pump, and so I'm going to take her out and we're going to replace her with an idler. Now previously I had told you I stole a pulley off another motor, and the intention was to make a fairly simple idler pulley from this, but I probably didn't think it through completely, because if you look at the actual motor, that pulley came from here, just underneath the coil packs on the Ecotec. That pulley is already mounted. So what I thought I would do is pull the pulley and mount off the engine completely. Now this is where it's really handy to have a parts car and a spare motor, because I've gone in and unbolted the whole assembly and pulled out what is an idler pulley and bracket. So that's the power steering pump off the spare motor, plus that's that idler pulley. And when I compared the two, logically the only difference beyond the size of the actual pulleys was how they mounted up. And that came down to two things. Clang, clang, clang. One was the bolts that bolted it down, and then the second one was the height. If we look at those on a square even surface, you can see this is slightly lower than the power steering pulley, so we need to space this out just a little bit to bring it up. In its stock position, the power steering pump bolts in just down here, and beyond obviously its position, that there is a mounting point which is a certain distance away from the actual pulley. Now this surface, and this is the spare motor, it's not originally flat, and so I've taken a grinder and taken off some of the raised section, which I'll show you on the actual engine in a minute. But I didn't touch the surfaces for the mounting holes or the circle that goes around the outside, because that is the flat plane where the pulley would mount. What I did was then I took this pulley, which is the same as obviously it's just come, I mean I've cleaned it obviously, but it's literally come from up under here, and I've turned it around and bolted at least that one point onto that surface, and that made a fairly good spot for the pulley, but just not quite far enough away from the motor. And in measuring that difference, it came out to just shy of 3 millimeters. So I've taken a piece of flat metal that's 3 mil. This piece I grabbed with it's got a right angle in it, which adds to the strength, and to place a 3 mil plate between the pulley and the engine would then space out that pulley exactly where it needs to be. I'm sorry about the lawnmower in the background. There's nothing I can do about it. He's been there all day now. So that's what I've made, using an original pulley on an original mount for that idler pulley. And these are stock parts off the Ecotec motor as used in the Holden. All I ended up having to do was to create a small plate which has a right angle in it for strength, 3 mil plate, and a little washer because the piece of metal I had wasn't quite large enough. And as a whole, with those two bolts, this bolts then into the factory position of the original power steering pump. except there's only two little problems left. The first one is that the original power steering pump mounting location isn't flat. Drop my washer. It's not flat, so this won't go mount flat on unless I grind that down. So I'll show you that in a second. And the second problem was then that the serpentine belt was, the original one, was too long for this pulley. So I've had to go out and buy a shorter belt, but that's only money, unfortunately. The aim is to avoid spending money. Using an original belt would have been better. Even though the belts I had rolled and probably needed replacing anyway, it's meant to be a budget build. Okay, there's the original power steering pump mounting location. And you can see that you've got the two mounting holes, top and bottom there, and the flat surface of the circle where the power steering pump mounts. But I'm assuming for strength or rigidity there's this crisscross in the what is cast. That's in the way. Where I need to grind down the most of this crisscross part, and then there's a little bit of a lip just on the edge here, so I'll need to take that right off the whole circle, probably not that part. And there's another one of these on the other side as well, again probably for strength. So we've grinded off the face, flattened it out, kind of looks a bit shiny, which it should, I suppose. Oh, look at that sun. I'm not a fan of leaving bare metal surfaces, so I'm just going to put a tiny little paint on what I've ground off. It stops it going rusty too quick. Okay, so bolt this thing on. One in the top. Oops. I don't know how many times I've done that now. Oh, you look at that. It's a power steering pump delete idler using an OEM idler, which we found under here. Look at the sun. Can't half tell that the sun's moving across the sky while I'm recording this. So I took my belt, which I have cut, and then I ran it around the pulleys and overlapped the belt to where I wanted it. And then with it taut, and I'll show you this on camera, you can see I made a couple little marks in the belt itself. The biggest notch where I wanted it, but then the allowance based on the tensioning pulley as to the lengths that I could deal with. And then I took that measurement and I measured it. Went down to my local parts store and bought a belt to suit. So we'll put this on, run it around and see whether it's a good fit. Alright, look at that. The placement belt fit like a charm in the end. Now I say in the end because this pulley down here, on the parts car motor that I did check a lot of this out, that was a larger size, and originally that larger size pulley on the parts car motor made this belt too short, but on this car it's the smaller size. I did swap it over on the spare parts engine to check and it worked just fine, but on this car it was already on the smaller size, so that looks great. I think that works brilliantly. Just have to start her up and check that it all spins fine, but I can't see why it wouldn't. I mean, it is an OEM factory pulley after all. It's just that this engine now has two of them, one under there and one down there. Alright, look at that. Brilliant. If you didn't know, focus, your tensioner should shake a little bit. It's showing that it's spring loading. But otherwise, that is absolutely brilliant. Anyway, that's all from me today. I hope you're having a good one. Bye.